Gosh, there's some giggling in the background. I wonder who that was. Anyway, good evening. You can tell we're amateur from that, can't you? Very welcome, all of you. This is a tribute to Claudia Myatt. Claudia Myatt, who you could simply describe as an artist, but that wouldn't get anywhere near what she really is. She's an adventurer. She's a traveller, a sailor, as we'll find a lot more about, a musician, a songwriter, a cartoonist, all-round funny lady. I think probably without more ado, we shall welcome and give you a virtual round of applause to Claudia. There she is.
Hello, Tom. Hello, everybody.
I'm sure a lot of that's going on. What you will find is that on the right-hand side of everybody's screen, or certainly as I'm looking at it anyway, there's a comment section, and we would love you to comment, ask questions, say what you'd like to say. Questions would be great, and we'll stop and pick them up as we go along. We split this really into a couple of bits. So the first takes Claudia from her arrival, 10 years ago now, in the Deben for the second time round. Would that be about right? And I think we'll perhaps get started with a few slides. Hope this isn't going to be too corporate, but it helps us all sort of understand a little more about the amazing life that she's led and actually where it all started. So Paul, who's pressing all the buttons in the studio this evening, there we go. That you saw as we were running up to the beginning of this show. And for goodness sake, isn't that absolutely the most stunning? Anyone who's spent any time in the water can totally recognize that. But let's move on and let's have a look at, there we are, the beginnings of your time on the water. Actually, it's not the beginnings, I don't think, because the beginning wasn't it? Was it? What was the time when you went then from the Scilly Islands in a Force 7?
Oh, that was before this. I sort of, yeah.
Anyway, look, carry on. I'm hogging it.
Yeah. No, I didn't really get into sailing till I was an adult, and we were flat sharing in London and broke, and somebody had the bright idea that hiring a yacht was cheaper than hiring a cottage, so we did it, even though we didn't know what we were doing. But then I got hooked on sailing, which is a bit odd, really. And then I bought a little boat when I was in my 30s and lived on it and tried to be an artist. And this was, that's a photo from that time. First midlife crisis, that was. I think you should have several and enjoy every one.
Where did art start then for you?
I don't know. I was a secretary, so I'm not a trained artist. I've just always loved it. My father drew a lot. He was a meteorologist and drew on the back of the weather charts each day. And I asked him how to draw, and he said, do a little bit every day. And I didn't. I do now.
Is that what you tell your students in your teaching?
Yeah, absolutely it is.
Paul, where are we?
Home. Home is a river. This is my current abode, a little century-old Dutch steel tugboat. Well, I am actually on a very tidal river in Suffolk. And it's been a challenging few years putting that together because she was fairly run down when I got her. But it's a beautiful place to live, especially in the summer. Everybody envies me in the summer. In the winter, they offer me their bathrooms. I've got my little sailing dinghy alongside. So yeah, great.
And there's a kayak hidden away there somewhere, I think, as well.
Yes, that's just out of shot. I was out in that this morning at dawn. It was beautiful there. Yeah. Saw a crested green.
All right. But you've got to do some work, haven't you? So I talked about a sense of humour.
This is, I sort of fell into cartooning. Again, my father used to do a lot, but I've been drawing cartoons for a yachting magazine for, I can't remember how many years. I started about 13 or 14 years ago, I think. I meant to look it up and I forgot. And I just love the fact that sailing is the most ridiculous sport. You're cold, wet and miserable most of the time, and then you come back and say what a wonderful time you had. And I have no idea why I do it. I have no idea why I like it. And I love all these husband and wife jokes, because you hear a lot of those in marinas around the country. When I was sailing around in my boat, a lot of harbour masters I'd go and pay the harbour fees, and they go, well, where's the skipper? Expecting a man.
And I bet that drives you mad. There we go.
That's all right.
Some work for the RYA.
This was a lucky break. I got commissioned to write and illustrate 7 books on how to sail for children, which suited me fine, because that's the kind of mental age I like thinking. And it's the same information as adult learning, but you just put it across in a more fun way, with lots of mad pirates in there and cartoons. They asked if I would illustrate it to start with, and then they said, oh, could I write it as well? So with my fingers crossed behind my backs, I said, yeah. And the ones I didn't know anything about, they'd send me off to try and learn. So I did go windsurfing, which isn't on there. I did that later. And they sent me off to learn to windsurf, which was very funny, because I was wearing glasses at the time and I don't like falling in and getting wet. So I kind of absolutely refused in the beginner's class to fall in until they threatened to push me in. But it's just a matter of, if I don't know it, I'll find out. And started with the sailing one. And I always had an expert to help. And they were challenging to do. That was the first books I'd ever done, and learning on the job. But they're still out there.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's one of my month. I do every month, or every issue, I do a cartoon for Practical Boat Owner magazine. And it's always in response to a very funny article written by this chap, Dave, who always rings me up and he goes, I'm sending you the article. Oh, it's late this month. They need the cartoon by tomorrow. Good luck. And we have a good, long-standing working relationship, which is very productive. Yeah, he's a good writer. He keeps finding funny things to say about sailing. That is, these are great pics that you found. That is the view from my window. How lucky am I? I keep a sketchbook in my wheelhouse, and every so often just do a few things just to keep my hand in. And I did a lovely series of illustrations for a wonderful book series by Julia Jones. If you haven't heard of her, look her up. She's a writer and publisher of Golden Duck Publications. And this is a cracking series of books for sort of older children and adults with a sort of adventurous mindset. And very edgy sailing adventures for young people. And the Strong Wind series, I recommend them. And it was a delight working for Julia. Got little illustrations on the inside, and she became quite an influential part of my life and helped me out when I was in big trouble.
So you've got nice things to say about her?
Just a tad, yeah.
Well, that's good, because we've got her here somewhere.
Oh, you haven't?
Yeah, there we are.
Hello, Claudia, and Francis is here as well.
Just getting into it. This is your life.
It certainly is.
Oh, you're showing your age now.
Oh dear. No, look, I didn't know you were going to say nice things about the books, because I've got lots of things that I want to say, and I know I haven't got time to say them. But if you remember, you're talking about experts. The first time I think we met, you were doing Go Cruising, and you made the mistake of writing to myself and my brother, saying, ask your children what you think about this. We said, ask the children? I don't think so. We grabbed it and we wrote hours and hours, screeds and screeds to you, because we wanted to put our point of view over. And I think the thing is that with sailing, the best thing to do is to retain your sort of childishness, if you possibly can, because then you don't turn grumpy as you get old. But do you remember, Claudia, when we were doing, I don't know if you can see it, that one, The Lion of Sol Bay, and we stood, you had a studio down in Waldringfield then, and we just stood there, and I said, it's the pub sign, it's the pub sign up the road, and you just got your watercolors out and you sort of sloshed it about and came out with this wonderful, crazy, I don't know if you can see, it's crazy lion in about 10 minutes flat. It was, do you remember? It was one of the most fun sessions we've ever had. It was,
that was a lucky break.
I'm going to just butt in and because there's a bit of a serious side about having you here as well, Julia. Well, only because Claudia hasn't been, she's not been hiding from a pretty rough time in her life, and I think that's when you bumped into her, where, if I'm right, Claudia, you had no money, no home, no partner, and no get up and go. And I think Julia kind of picked you up, didn't she?
She did, very much so, yeah.
Oh, I can't. There was never a time when Claudia didn't have get up and go. You know, I mean, she might have got up and gone at that particular moment, but no, that's the point. I was talking to somebody only the other day, and I was saying, however hard you think life is in lockdown, just look at Claudia. And at the beginning of this lockdown, all your work dried up, or you were worried about being stuck on the boat, and you know, we all thought we were going to die of the plague anyway. And you know, look what you've done through this last period. It's fantastic. You've never lost your get up and go ever.
Well,
she's a tough girl. I've certainly found that. Julia, thank you very much for dropping in. It's lovely to see you.
Don't forget, Francis wants to say hello as well.
Yes.
Yep.
Hello. We love you, Claudia.
We certainly do. Okay.
Right, we will press on.
Thanks for having us. Press away.
Right, where did we get to, Paul? There we go.
Where did we get to? We're back to sailing again, and after, the life crisis we referred to was I had a bit of a marital capsize, as many of us do at some stage, and that's how I ended up through my own decisions, on kind of, you know, skint and a bit short of opportunities. So I decided all my traveling had to be done for free or very, very cheaply. And this was a boat sailing around Britain with a fleet of other traditional boats. And I volunteered myself as crew. And we were all just chipping in expenses. And I knew that this boat was of interest to Classic Boat magazine. So I wrote an article about the boat while I was sailing it that covered very neatly my travel expenses for the trip. I only did half the trip, but it was quite a challenge, sailing with two lovely men who I didn't know very well. And you have that thing in the middle of the night where you need a wee on the boat and everybody's asleep, and you try and wriggle out from the tight bunk I'm in without sticking my feet in the skipper's face. And then the toilet on this boat was behind a curtain. And do you know how loud a wee sounds in the middle of the night on a small boat? I mean, this is probably getting far too inappropriate, but you're trying to wee quietly on a small boat in between two sleeping strangers is a new experience for me. But no, it was a great trip. It was a lovely boat, lovely people.
Character building, I have no time.
They should be on the RYA syllabus.
All right. Right, I want to jump in here because this is really where we're headed with this evening rather. And we're moving towards this wonderful Sketchbook Sailor book, which is Claudia with no camera. And we'll come back to this theme time and time again about what you see when you sketch and what you see when you paint. And here are some early examples on Marie. Was that the boat that you were on there?
I did go to Pampal on Marie, the trawler that ran away with the band. That was a later adventure. This one, I volunteered my services as mate on a traditional charter boat to get to a festival I really wanted to get to but couldn't afford. So I earned my passage again, and it didn't half rain. It rained and it rained. And I sort of got by now into the habit of using my sketchbook as a journal, a diary. I wasn't so interested in making beautiful paintings. I just wanted to hone my skills, really, learn to draw properly once and for all, and just use it as a visual diary. And
that, ladies and gents, is to, sorry, if we keep talking over each other a little bit, it's because there's a slight delay, but hopefully you'll put up with that. What is a really fascinating conclusion out of all of this, I hope you'll come to, is that what you can pack a notebook with color and with shapes is just so much more dynamic than photographs, and it's got Claudia in it, and that has been a real joy capturing that. Let's move on. There we are. That's another example, isn't it?
Yeah, more the same. And the nice thing about Sketchbook is everybody does it in their own way. There's no right way to do it. It's as personal as your written diary. So we tend to kind of encourage everybody else on trips to do it as well. And it's a lovely how different they all turn out and how much it makes you slow down and take notice. But say if it rains, you can always just draw your breakfast. It did rain a lot on that trip, I remember. It was character building.
So there we've got a little bit of background of Claudia, the person that she is, the tough time she's come from, and dwell on all of that, and the talent that she's got. And I think at this point we are getting close to moving on to the book itself, are we, Paul? Ah, something's happened.
My love is gone a-sailing, his fortune for to find. He's left me here alone on shore. Didn't think to ask if I'd mind. Didn't think to ask if I'd mind. I will dress in sailor's clothing, my woman's breasts I'll bind. I'll go to sea as a cabin boy, and my true love I will find. And my true love I will find. So I shipped on board a schooner, and I learned a sailor's trade. I worked as hard as any man. They never knew that I was a maid. They never knew that I was a maid. But the boatswain, he was handsome, with a roving hand and eye. I said, kind sir, you flatter me, but I'm not that kind of guy. I'm just not that kind of guy. Then he put his arms around me, and he whispered in my ear, I'm a woman dressed in sailor's clothes. Can you love me now, my dear? Can you love me now, my dear? So I put my arm around him. Now my secret I must tell. I said, well, that makes two of us, 'cause I'm a woman as well. Because I'm a woman as well. So we sailed into the sunset. My mind was in a whirl. Once I loved a sailor boy. Now I love my sailor girl. Now I love my sailor girl.
And that was popped in there because it just is so reflective of Claudia's sense of humour, and that comes through in the book we're about to look at, and in the period that built up to this amazing trip. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking and Julia is going to... I'm going to stop talking. Actually, I really annoy everybody because I'm not for a minute. I'll tell you why. Because I just want to read out some of what's come through here. And it says, sitting here looking forward to Claudia's life story. What an amazing woman. I want a croissant for breakfast. What,
Yeah.
what instrument is that? It's beautiful.
That is an auto harp. It's American, and I've got 4 of them, and I love them to bits. And I was introduced to it when I first started playing music at the grand age of 55. And because before that, I thought it was something that only musicians did. And then I decided to, I got introduced to that and thought I'm going to have a go anyway. And it's lovely. I couldn't get on with guitars, but I really get on with that. It's very intuitive to play. And it got me going.
And Warwick comments, it's an auto harp. Be careful, they're addictive. Which I think you've just confirmed they probably are. Okay, let's just a couple, 1 or 2 more. What a privilege to listen to these wonderful people, such lovely illustrations. Claudia's a bit good, eh? Love from Bertie, etc., etc., etc. Steve, hello, Claudia. You look as though you're somewhere tropical. So there we go.
Tropical? No, I've got a jumper on. I'm in my studio.
Anyway, and there's lots more. Don't forget questions if you would like. We'll cover some later on. Right, over, back to you.
Okay, this is a voyage I made in 2019 when I got, if you're over 60, and some of you may be, you sort of think, if not now, when? And you kind of think of all the things you haven't done and you'd like to do, and then you decide that this is the if not now, when decade. And I decided to just start having some adventures and stop being so damn timid. And I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. And then an email came through telling me about this trip that this boat was making. This is a boat called Tekla, and she's Dutch, and she's a charter boat. And I hope that Tekla's crew may be listening or maybe watching later. She's a remarkable boat because she specializes in chartering to extreme places. So I joined her in the Galapagos, and she'd just been through the Northwest Passage, having spent time in Greenland. So she tracks the kind of hardy adventurers. And hearing about this trip coincided with me sort of gathering together my pot of savings, cashing in my little pension that didn't really work, and thought, I'll put that away for a rainy day. And then I thought, it's raining. And I decided to kind of grow old with no regrets, really. And I've always wanted to cross an ocean under sail. All the sailing I've done has been in the UK and France and Holland. And it's been usually in the rain, in lots of tides, when you're usually kind of getting around a headland against the tide. I sailed a lot when my family were young, and it was always a challenge. It was great, but it was always a challenge. And I just wanted to know what it was like to be under sail in the wide ocean. I've done a lot of ocean. I love oceans. I love islands. I've done a lot of pottering around on oceans on cruise ships. Again, part of my wheeze for free travel was being an art tutor on cruise ships, because you get to go to places and in return for your services. And that was interesting. But I got to do the Atlantic and the Pacific that way, and that was quite nice. But I really wanted to do a bit of ocean under sail, and there's a lovely company called Classic Sailing, and they let you know about all these traditional boats going all around the world. This little one popped up in my inbox just as I was beginning to think, oh, good, I've got some savings now, I'll save those. So, of course, I didn't. I booked the trip. And she's a lovely boat. She's steel, similar age to mine, and Dutch, which is always a good recommendation. And I'd heard nothing but good about her. So I booked the first part of the trip from Galapagos to Easter Island, because I really wanted to see those islands. And then I thought, it's a long way to go for just 3 weeks. Where's she going after that? And she was going to Falkland. And I thought, that's on my wish list too. But it means sailing around Cape Horn. And you're talking to somebody here who's too scared to drive in Ipswich, because I don't like the one-way system. I'm not a roughy-toughy sailor. And I thought, I'll just do it. So I did it. And it was, yeah, it was an adventure. What I decided to do, this is one of my sketchbooks. I decided if I was going to actually spend money going sailing, I was going to give myself a little bit of a challenge. So I decided not to take a camera, but just to record everything in sketchbooks. I think cameras are wonderful things and I use them all the time, but I think we've become desensitized to them. We use them without thought. We just go clickety, clickety, click at every single thing we see. And I'm not a great photographer. I'd rather be sketching. And if I see this iguana, I could either sketch it or photograph it. I can't really do both. And if I photograph it, why would I? Because the internet is now flooded with images. If I want to show somebody what an iguana looks like, I'll Google it. Be far better picture than I could ever take. So I decided to make this record of my trip a much more personal one and just limit myself to one photograph a day on my camera. So I just packed my sketchbooks. The challenge of this is that, of course, in the Galapagos, where I spent a week before joining Tekla, I was with people who were photographing. So I took a tour and the guide would say, here's an iguana, and everybody gets their cameras out and goes click, 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 right, on we go to the next thing. And I'm just getting my paints out. So on this one, you can see there's patches of color there. That's where I was just rapidly making notes of the colors I'd need so I could finish them off later. So that's the kind of way of working. And the Galapagos is an extraordinary place for wildlife. These were white-tipped sharks, and we were out in a very little kind of little rib watching them swirl around underneath us. So I didn't have time to get the paints out then. I was just making quick line drawings. And in a way, your lines and your sketches reflect the excitement you feel at seeing something as much as anything else. Sketchbooks don't have to be accurate. They just have to be honest, really, about what you're seeing. It doesn't matter if it's not accurate. So I tended to add the color later. After 7 days on the island, it was time to join the ship. And there she was. She'd had to jump through a lot of hoops to get into the waters of the Galapagos because they are very protective of the environment. And she had to go to mainland Ecuador and be scrubbed from top to bottom and have all her food confiscated. But eventually she got there, and there were, I can't remember how many of us there were on the first trip. 11 of us, I think, on the first leg, from all over the world, all a bit excited and a bit nervous, and ready to set sail for Easter Island, which is one of the most remote islands in the Pacific. That's our route. I bought these old charts before we set off and used them. I stuck that in my sketchbook and used it and drew on it. What was refreshing about ocean sailing is you're pretty much on the same course the whole time. We asked Heist, the skipper, how long I'd be steering, whatever it was. Can't remember now. And about 2:10, I think. And he said, about 2 weeks. And after sailing, dodging around in the Thames estuary and the East Coast, where you're changing course every 2 seconds, that was quite refreshing. So off we went. My first experience of sailing in the deep ocean. Took me a while to get into the swing of sketching because I do get horribly seasick, and it was fine because the sea was quite calm. We were in the tropics. So after a few days of feeling a bit thick-headed, I was absolutely fine. So I really got into the stride in about day 4. And you'll see there, I started just making notes, using it as a diary again. I've got there our watch system, which was worked very well, 3-watch system. For us, it was us voyage crew. It was 4 hours on, followed by 8 hours off. And that worked well, though you never quite get used to that 3:30 a.m. call. And for the professional crew, which was skipper and 3 crew, it was 6 on and 6 off. They worked their socks off, and they were superb, good company as well. And we're also, on that previous slide, you'll notice that we had a swim stop, which was quite fun. Did you say you'd done that, Tom? Had a swim mid-ocean?
I think it's one of the most terrifying things I've ever experienced.
Oh, it's fun.
The idea that there's 3 miles of water beneath you.
Yeah.
And the boat is just gently moving away from you, and you can't get to the rope on time.
No, she was just sitting there, and it was fine. But yeah, that it just feels cheeky, doesn't it? Anyway, still got the same number of fingers and toes left. So I started to record daily life on board, fresh bread every day and all the different colours, because I thought as a marine artist and illustrator, it was really about time I learned to paint the sea properly. And the only way is just go out there and stay there. So I was just, when you're on the same boat every day with the same people and basically the same view, which is the sea and the sky, my challenge was to decide to do something slightly different every day. And I never, ever ran out of subjects.
Can I just mention something for people who wouldn't have had the pleasure necessarily of being able to sail in deep oceans? And I've never managed anyway to find how to record the shape of waves with a camera or necessarily the color of them. And I think what you've done here is phenomenal, and how the real colors are coming through and the real shapes are coming through and the real skies are coming through, because you're really, really looking at them, aren't you?
That's what sketching makes you do. It just makes you look properly and look harder, notice actively rather than just passively. And you're always asking, what am I seeing? What color is it? How would I do that? And then something moving, the shape repeats and comes back to, and again, repeats over and over again. So you just have to wait. It's very intense, but very, very good for you. It makes you live in the moment. And it's even good for you, even if you're not very good at drawing. I've been doing it a long time, so I've sort of got a degree of skill now. Even if you're not very good at it, firstly, it's a learned skill. And I'm doing a lot of online teaching at the moment, as you can imagine. So it's doable. And also, even if you're not very good, the act of looking and connecting is still good for you. Even if your drawing is absolute rubbish, it's still that process of thinking, what am I seeing? And looking at something as if you've never seen it before in your life. That's what you have to do to draw. Not assume anything, forget what you know, just think, what am I seeing? Yeah. There's another swim stop there. I got out early and tried to draw the swimmers in the water with all that kind of dappled ripply bits. Didn't quite get there, but I tried.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I stuck that one in only on the basis that that's how quickly the weather can change. It was splashing about beautiful Pacific, only to then end up in a squall. It's not so funny.
Oh, well, that's what tropics are like. I mean, we had a lot of squalls. The poor crew had the task of working out whether it was going to hit us, and if it did, how severe was it going to be, and whether we had to do anything to the sails. The main thing when you're on a long passage is to avoid any damage at all and any breakage. You have to be totally self-sufficient. And, very, very experienced skipper and, two skippers, brother and sister team, Yet and Heis Sloik, who may, I hope, are listening. They're absolutely superb. They know exactly how to look after their ship and when to kind of get out of the way of one of these beasts. That was done very quickly on deck because the rain is about to absolutely tip on you. And sometimes the faster you work, there's a bit of blotchy watercolor there and some crayons scribbled on top. And you really have to just go for it. And actually that worked quite well. Probably worked better than it would have done if I'd done a more considered version. It certainly wouldn't have worked photographing it and then working from the photo. Easter Island. It was quite exciting arriving at Easter Island. It was pouring with rain. It was like arriving in a Scottish harbour. And it's a funny island because it's got no harbour. As you can see, we kept having to move anchorage and hop round from one side of the island to the other, depending on where the wind was blowing from. And a lot of my shipmates left there, but I'd elected to stay on. So after a couple of days on the island, I shipped back on board again. I had found a nice cheap hostel and whizzed around the island. The car hire on Rapa Nui is Easter Island. It's the Polynesian name. The car hire process, there's sort of two roads, one that goes around the island and one across. It's 14 miles across and 7 miles wide. So you can get around it in a day and see all the sights. You go to hire a car and you can have anything you like as long as it's a white Suzuki Jeep. And they say, you say, can I hire a car? And they go, yes. Can you drive? You go, yeah. Here are the keys. There is no insurance. And off you go. It was, I'd like to have spent longer there. It was fascinating. And yes, everywhere are the big stone statues. So I was drawing a lot of those. But I had 3 days there, and that was, just delightful place, sitting in the high street, kind of in a cafe, wishing I could speak Spanish, realizing I can't. But great place. All National Park again. This one's interesting. This is beautiful, beautiful bay on the north of the island. And you can see the moai, the stone statues there right on the beach. And it was a beautiful beach. And I walked on it and scooped up a handful of sand. And there were lots of little coloured fragments in the sand. And every single one was plastic. Every single one was a piece of sea-worn plastic from God knows where, swirled up with the currents. Spoiled it all. Beautiful place. And on we go. The next leg of the trip was going to be a lot more challenging because Cape Horn, as I'm sure most people know, is the Everest of sailing. It's the noisy, bumpy, windy bit of ocean between Antarctica and South America, which has drowned thousands of sailors over the centuries. And that's where we were going. The Association of Cape Horners, there is such a thing, stipulates that to call yourself a true Cape Horner, you have to have done a voyage of at least 3,000 miles under sail alone with no engine. And that voyage has to include the latitude of 50 degrees south, both on the Pacific and the Atlantic side. Those conditions may sound a bit kind of random, but the fact is now, of course, you can fly to Punta Arenas or Ushuaia, jump on a little cruise ship and go and see Cape Horn in a little cruise ship very safely and comfortably, and then nip back again. So it's not, you could say, I'm a Cape Horner and you've seen it all from the comfort of your own balcony. So that condition is really to keep in it some of the challenge that you have to face if you go around it under sail in a small boat. And so that's why on that map, the route shows us going north of the Falklands and then dropping back to the Falklands, because you have to cross that line. And it wasn't easy to cross because we were becalmed for a day and we only just made it in time. But it was wild and beautiful. We had the advantage of sat-nav weather, so we could avoid the nastiest bits, and we were doing it at the favourable time of year, and we were going from west to east, which is the easiest way. But we still, we still had quite a lot of challenge in it. And our skipper, she's a very experienced lady, and she got us round there in style. And that was our route. It was just beautiful down there, wet, cold, and uncomfortable, but the overwhelming feeling was of the empty beauty of that place and the wildlife and the albatross.
Then let's.
I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and the sky, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer by, and the wheels kick and the wind song and the white sails shaking, and a grey mist on the sea's face and a grey dawn breaking.
I must go down to the seas again for the call of the running tide.
again to the lonely sea and the sky. And all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. And the waves kick and the wind song, and the white sails shaking, and a grey mist on the sea's face, and a grey dawn breaking, and a grey mist on the sea's face, and a grey dawn breaking.
Do you know what the best thing about being an amateur platform, and we don't pretend to be anything else, is that if you get a little bit of judder on the video, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it was a lovely video. The video was taken by my my crewmate George McLeod, who was taking some good footage. I didn't think to do it, and the music was by a lovely local group called Simple Folk, which is Rachel Dodds and Stephen Christopher, and I love that song. Obviously the words are by Macefield and the tune is by Andy Vine, a Canadian, and I sing that song, but they do it so much nicer, and it seemed to fit the video. So thanks to Rachel and Stephen and to George for that. It seemed to work.
Indeed. I'm going to read out a few more of these things, and then for the last third of the time we've got the pleasure of you taking us around Cape Horn with your wonderful sketches and just seeing all of that through your eyes. It's really exciting. So we've got So Inspiring, and then you've got a bit of a debate going about dumping plastics that Nick approves of. And then we've got Trees That Are Really Elegant. Claudia is no slouch as a writer either. Her blog on her website is well worth a look. Not fair, it says. Living in the moment.
Jack of all trades. That's for another.
Living in the moment and connecting with shapes. Fascinating. You're a wonderful storyteller. I'm glad I stole the song Time and Tide off you before the others there on the quay last summer.
Steve.
Fantastic stuff, Claudia. How do you remember everything when there's no time? Very impressive. Really interesting about the quarantine regulations. I've always wanted to go to the Galapagos, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
Anyway, away you go, please.
Right. So we set sail from, setting sail from Easter Island. I was trying to get into the habit of drawing figures on the move. Again, it's not easy because they keep moving, and you have to wait for the actions to be repeated and try and get that feeling of the weight in the hands. It's all practice. I'll get there in the end. What I want on my gravestone, please, is, damn, I was just getting the hang of it. That's a little picture of the moonlit night. I was just grabbing moments. But we knew there'd be fewer calm nights to come, and we were savouring every one as the weather got colder. The weather got colder, and we put on more layers. I feel the cold very easily, so I'd taken loads of thermals and merinos, and I decided to draw some of the layers. I kept some in reserve. I went up to 6 layers at once. Getting dressed took a long time. And then you'd hobble up on deck, up the ladder, kind of waddling everything on. And we were very lucky. There was little radiators in the cabins, so you were able to kind of dry your gloves at the end of a watch and sort of snuggle back into your bunk. Trying to get the cut of the sea again. And the nice thing is, people were asking, isn't it boring being at sea? Because there was absolutely nothing to see but the sea. And it was never, ever boring. We saw no ships, I think just one. The first part of the journey, there wasn't really any wildlife, though that did change as we got further south and the albatrosses started following us. But you get the feeling you're in the middle of a circle of ocean. That was the beginning of a song, that phrase. There was nothing to see but the circle of ocean where blue of the sea meets the blue of the sky. And I can't remember what happened to the rest of it. I wrote it down and lost it, so it doesn't matter. Maybe it'll come back, maybe it won't. But it was just that feeling of you're always in the middle of your circle. And the sea started to get rougher, and it's just fascinating trying to paint it when you're being thrown around. I wedged my sketchbook under the main sheet, and then had to move it quickly if the sail needed to be moved. And that one, I just was kind of hurling paint at the page, really, with the excitement of it all. And again, photographers have a tough time too, because if you photograph a wave, as many of you will know, it doesn't look anything as majestic as it really is. And again, I have the same problem, just trying to get the feeling of that hill of water rising high above you, behind you. And then it's the boat lifts her tail and under it goes, or sometimes splashes you on the deck. But you're just watching and watching and watching and trying to get that intense dark blue under the crest of the wave as it's moving towards you. It was just, yeah, exciting, really. And the weather got colder, so I started finding more excuses to draw down below. I did quite a few bits of sketching in the chart room. I did all the navigation equipment and all the kind of chart table. That was a tot of whiskey we had when we crossed our first 50 degrees south on the Pacific side. We had a kind of ceremonial dram from the captain, which was very nice. And our first albatross, some of our first albatrosses starting arriving, and they were always there in increasing numbers behind the ship. Just huge, huge birds. Well, all different sizes, but some of the big ones were with us as well. They're 3-meter wingspans. Again, everybody was photographing them, and I was trying to draw them. And I did cheat and borrow some of the photographs for the detail. But they're just beautiful birds. Yeah, rough weather steering was quite challenging. She's a heavy old ship, about 120 tons, I think. I hope that's right. And you're at the wheel, and you really, really daren't go off course too much because you might break something important. And you could be surfing down the crest of a wave at 11 knots, and you're at the wheel, and I did a little squeal, and the mate said, "Who's this fabulous pint-sized Californian lady?" She said, "Are you squealing in terror or excitement?" And I just said, "Yes." And it was, you couldn't do it for too long because it really made your arms ache, but it was quite required every ounce of concentration to steer down a big sea. It wasn't huge. It was probably only about 5 meters or so, but it was still quite exciting. At no stage, though, was I afraid, because I think the ship and the captain and the crew inspired so much confidence that I think when you are nervous about something, the way forward is to tuck yourself under the wings or in the slipstream of people who know what they're doing and just go along with them. And when I wasn't on watch shrieking, I was in my bunk reading or listening to music. Some of the music I listened to was by Simple Folk, by the people who sang that song, and had that in my ears as I was dozing or feeling, just lying there with the rock of the ship. And it was getting near Christmas, but it was also getting near Cape Horn, and we were more interested in which day we'd be around the Horn rather than where would we be on Christmas Day. And it was quite exciting on Boxing Day when we could see the coast of Chile, and we zoom in on that chart and you get all those exciting places like Desolation Island and the Beagle Channel. There's so much history in those places, so much history of exploration and struggle and sheer bloody-minded tenacity of the early ships getting through there, around there, charting it. We had GPS and every gizmo you could imagine, but they did it with nothing. And I just had this, it was fairly humbling to be in that place and realize what those early explorers had gone through to pave the way for us. It was quite something. I always carry tracing paper in my sketch pad so that I can trace maps, because I like maps, and I always put them in my sketchbooks. This was Christmas Day can you believe it's Christmas Day 2019, and it was very wild and wet, and I went up on deck to get my morning tea and be on watch, and a big wave came and sort of sloshed around my feet, but I got my big boots on, so that was fine. Christmas Day I will never forget. Rather lovely, rather wild and bumpy. And that was Cape Horn, off which we were becalmed for about 6 hours, or even longer, I may be wrong. And again, we weren't using the engine, obviously, so we were just sitting there, rolling in the swell and looking at this awesome place, about which so much has been written and sung. And you get all the sea shanties. I'm fascinated by the folklore of sea music, and every single sea song has the phrase. You had to go around Cape Horn where you wish to God you'd never been born. And it's a place of human endurance. And I was sitting in a very comfortable boat with my slippers on some of the time, watching just that iconic place. Yes, it was the beauty of that ocean that really struck me. I expected it to be challenging and, you know, character building and all of that, but I didn't expect it to be so astoundingly beautiful. The air was as clear as crystal. You felt more alive than ever. The colours were dancing all around you. When the sun came out, we had a beautiful day after a wild, windy night. A beautiful day suddenly just transformed everything. And there, the wind was against us, so we were hurtling south for a while. But the colours of the sea, I will never, ever forget. And eventually, after struggling up to, in very, very light winds, to 50 degrees south on the Atlantic side, where we did have, thank you yet, we had another tot of rum, we then stomped back to the Falklands, where it was time to go. And it was heartbreaking leaving the ship and saying goodbye to the captain and crew and all my shipmates who'd been huge fun and great company. We had lots of long night watch conversations, as you do. And they all flew home and I stayed on there for a couple of weeks because I really wanted to do a lot of drawing on the Falklands. And I did do a lot of drawings. I filled 50 pages of sketchbooks. And I've been invited to go back there as on another project as artist in residence to the Scott Polar Research Institute, which will take me to Antarctica and later in the year. And I love the Falklands. I was watching Tekla on that one. Tekla is sailing out of the harbour, and a bit of my heart went with her. And I sat to and started drawing penguins, and it was a delightful stay. Quirky and challenging, and I met a lot of lovely people. That's all. That was it. Great. Thank you, Tom. Was that the kind of thing? Can't hear you. We can't hear you, Tom.
Yeah. I'm so excited, you see. I do that all the time.
Sounds like a Zoom thing. You spend your life on Zoom going, unmute yourself.
Gets to a point where you just don't care anymore. No, we've got a ton of questions. But before that, I just wanted to tell folks that I'm working very hard to try to get you to come back and have a session with us just on the Falklands, because I've seen some of the wonderful work that you've done in the 2 weeks that you spent there. And that's worth an hour of people's time to have a look at some of that and to meet you again. So hopefully, if you're not off with the Royal Navy, or when you come back, you'll come and see us again and we can have a look at the Falklands end of it. Anyway, where do we start with questions? And I think the first one is, can anyone paint? That sounds to be a question a lot of people must be asking themselves.
Yes. Anybody
I think they're probably looking for a little more encouragement than that.
No, I think it can. You have to want to put the hours in. I find that art is very much like music. You could, you know, I was probably told at school I couldn't be musical, but I think anybody, you can paint, you can learn to paint for your own pleasure. You can learn a certain degree of skill, which is what I'm trying to do with music. You can just, if you enjoy putting the hours in, you'll get as far as you want to go with it on your own way and style. But it's a learned skill. I had to learn. I wasn't a natural. It's just all about techniques and enjoying spending time with it. Just do a lot of it, miles on paper. Yes, but you absolutely can learn to paint. Yeah.
Oh, that's encouraging. Another one here. How did you all get on together? There's a question. I'd like you to answer honestly.
My shipmates may well be watching. Everybody got on very well indeed, because I think we were all there for the same kind of reason. We were mixed bag. There was all nationalities. A lot of, I don't know, what were we? We were Dutch, Chinese, American, British, New Zealand, German, all sorts. But because we were all, it was quite a structured lifestyle, because when you're on deck, there's either work to do or there's absolutely nothing to do, in which case you have daft conversations about, can you stand on one leg, or how do you get to the stars, or how did the Polynesians sail? There's enough general conversation. Nobody, everybody's wise enough not to start on politics or anything contentious, but there was so much around us to talk about, and we were all there for a reason and with a job to do. And you really can't, there isn't time to fall out with somebody when you're all pulling on the same rope. And also there was plenty of space. Hey, Yet, my captain Yet is watching, apparently, it says on my screen. Hello, Yet. And amazing captain, that lady, and so is her brother. There's also, so the ship is big enough for you to have plenty of privacy. You weren't forced, you weren't in each other's way all the time. We got together at meal times, but when you were off watch, you had plenty of space to go and lie in your bunk, curl up. If the weather's warm enough on deck, curl up on a sail bag and read a book. You really didn't have to have more time with your shipmates than you needed if you wanted time on your own. So it's very relaxed, a kind of combination of disciplined and relaxed. I think if we'd all been, landed together in a kind of holiday cottage or something, and things might have been a bit different. But I found everybody just unfailingly good company and interesting. Everybody had done interesting things with their lives. They were all there as part of an interesting journey. And they were all people, most of us, as many of us are still in touch on Facebook. We all had a tale to tell, and everybody was very respectful of everybody else and everybody else's space. We were all two to a cabin, and bunkmates were great. My bunkmate was a lovely Australian called Shelley, who, it was just really interesting to spend time with all these people, knowing that it was for a short time. The second leg was actually 4 weeks, so that's quite a long time to be with people. But again, you didn't tend to see the people who weren't on watch with very much, because they were asleep when you were awake. And it was not as much of a problem as you might think, or that it might have been in other circumstances.
There's a question about concentration, and I'm guessing probably from an artist. And the question is, how difficult is it to concentrate when the boat's plunging around?
It's frustrating, but you really, really know that you'll never probably have that opportunity again. And you really want to catch that moment while you're in it. It's quite intense trying to draw something on the move. And you just have to be not too precious about how it turns out. Just sort of hurl yourself at the page and hope for the best. And I tend to work very quickly in very short bursts. I don't sit there and do a prolonged picture. All that stuff in my sketchbooks was done fairly quickly, because I have a very short attention span. And so, just go for it. And then I do a lot of finishing off later. On deck, paint doesn't dry. Watercolors don't dry in bad weather. So I go below deck and finish it off when it's drier later and calmer.
What size sketchbook and what sort of paper?
Oh, hold on. I might even have one here.
Don't go away.
I'm not going away. I'm right here. Look, that's it. That's A4. That was my ship's logbook, was A4. That's a Moleskine sketchbook, Moleskine the brand, and it's a watercolor journal, I think they call it. So it's got quite nice watercolory paper in it, but it's also good for drawing. The sketchbook I used on the islands was A5, so a bit easier to carry around when I was walking. But that's my ship's log.
Wonderful. Can I read out a few more of these? So thank you for a lovely interlude in my evening. Stay safe and well done. Fascinating story, brilliant, well done. Look forward to more stories. We are great admirers. Brilliant. May I ask what? Yeah, well, we've done that, haven't we? I have done a sketch of Claudia while she was speaking. Would you like to see it? Well, we certainly would. How we do that at the moment, I'm not sure. But if you email it to us, then we'll stick it on the website.
We'll stick it on Facebook.
Yeah, stick it on Facebook. That would be brilliant. Thank you, Anne. Do you think it's easier to paint or draw?
I never thought of that. Drawing's quite hard because you have to convert 3 dimensions to 2. So in a way, painting's easy because you're just playing with colour, and colour is very satisfying and emotional, and we like playing with it. And, you know, in a way we do colouring in because we don't want to do the drawing bit. So I think using colour effectively is hard, but it's a more immediate response and a more immediate reaction. Drawing takes a little bit more thought, I think.
We'll have one more question. I've got a ton here, so we could go on all night. We genuinely could, but let's just take the last one that's come in. How many sketchbooks did you take with you?
I took 4, but I only used 2 of them because they had, you know, I used this one. It just went exactly to the last page. I think there were 40 pages in it, and the very last page is our arrival in Falkland. It just worked. It just happened to work. I'd taken spares, but I didn't need them. And the other book just filled up as well. I think there was 1 page left. The other page was about 100 pages, and that just about filled up. Yeah.
Claudia, it's been a joy. We've been doing this now. We've been preparing for this for 3 or 4 weeks, I suppose. It's been a joy to get to know you. It's been generous of you to let us get kind of underneath the skin of Claudia, and we have managed to understand, and it's been easier to understand your art and your interpretation and your colors through knowing you. And so I'm really grateful to you for that. I've enjoyed it very much. What we've seen is just, promise you folks, it's the tip of the iceberg. We're down there in the Antarctic. There's just a mass in the book of color, and it sounds as though I'm trying to sell the book. I bought one, so I don't have to buy one. I just think that it's such a novel, such a unique, such a lovely collection stuffed full of colors and shapes and impressions that every library has to have one. So amazing stuff. And we are going to finish off. I'm sure there's massive things I should have said and haven't done, but we're up to time.
Well, we could say get in touch if there's things we've forgotten. And thank you to Homestage, which is a great website to connecting people with different interests during lockdown. And thank you to Tekla and all her crew and captains for making my life so interesting.
And ours as a consequence. A very good night to you. Thanks everybody for a mass of messages. They've just come pouring in. And we hope very much we can get you back for the Falklands episode. So good night and thank you.
Good night.